barrel roll.
Welcome to The Know. I am Mica.
And I'm Gus.
Disney should consider adding the Star Wars Battlefront 2 loot box fiasco to its Disney World theme park experience because, you know what, so far it's been the wildest ride of 2017. And now the fight against loot boxes has escalated yet again, even though how could it?
That's because one U.S. lawmaker has just revealed his plans for an anti-loot box bill, which, if passed into law, would basically make loot boxes illegal for anyone under the age of 21.
And if that's not enough, now even EA is saying that loot boxes might not make it back into Battlefront 2 after all.
Is it time to cue the Death Star explosion, dancing Ewoks, and yup?
Yeah!
No, don't.
Oh. This news comes from Hawaii State Representative Chris Lee, whom you might remember as the lawmaker who held a press conference condemning loot boxes just last month. At the time, he called Star Wars Battlefront 2 a Star Wars-themed online casino designed to lure money from unsuspecting kids, and he called for the video game industry to actually step in and do something.
Now, Lee has released a follow-up video on YouTube, this one outlining the beginnings of a bill that would effectively kill loot boxes for anyone under the age of 21, which in the video game world is basically a death sentence.
The video titled Time to Step Up features Lee and fellow Representative Sean Quinlan as they discuss what it means to craft the kind of legal language you need in order to get a bill passed into law. And most of that language centers around making any type of gambling mechanic in loot boxes an adults-only transaction.
In the video, the pair define gambling mechanic. That means any transaction where gamers are purchasing a percentage chance for an item. This new legislation would affect not only games sold at retail, but also games sold on digital platforms like Steam.
And in addition to all of that, they're also seeking some accountability measures for the games industry as well. Namely, some written legalese that forbids publishers from futzing with probabilities behind the curtain and would probably require them to disclose some of their numbers, similar to laws that have already been established around loot boxes in, places like China.
It also sounds like the rules that go around like with slot machines and other forms of gambling that we're all familiar with. They also single out certain practices like tweaking values for specific players who are likely to spend more. We don't have proof that any of that is actually going on, but in some games, we do know that publishers have been thinking about that kind of thing. Even Activision's patented a couple of shady tactics like that, and to them, all of this is totally unethical.
And this isn't just a couple of guys in Hawaii working on this on their own. According to Lee, several state legislators have reached out to them since their first video. Their goal now is to start getting this anti-loot box bill drafted so they can then pass some working language on to other officials, and then they can start some regulatory measures in their own state.
Which makes this kind of a bigger deal. Lee says the most obvious thing is prohibiting the sale of games with predatory game mechanics to those under 21. That's something that I think everybody should be able to agree on, and that might be enough. If you take away that share of the market from the gaming industry, they might actually change games across the board for the better.
Lee goes on to say, we don't need to change the laws in every state, we just need to keep the conversation going, to keep the pressure up and ultimately get enough attention to this issue so that maybe the laws in a couple states change, but that's enough to compel the industry to build games that meet those laws, stop exploiting folks who have gaming addictions, and actually create better games.
But of course, Lee says any real push has to come from gamers. The video wraps up with a call for gamers to get involved if they care about this issue, and even offers a form letter that gamers can send to their elected officials.
The letter discusses the rise of loot boxes and their current role in the industry, and also outlines some of the dangers. It states, unlike carnival games, collecting cards, or similar purchases of chance, video games require active, lengthy participation during which consumers are exposed to psychological manipulation techniques, which can result in real addiction and harm.
It goes on to say the scale and ease of access to these games make addressing these concerns critical. Casinos have long been criticized for building a business model around the exploitation of psychological vulnerabilities in many people. These business models are now being replicated by the online gaming industry to do the same, right on the phones and in the homes of countless families around the country.
So all of this caps off a pretty tumultuous month for Battlefront 2. EA's been held to the fire for the game's microtransactions since before it even launched, forcing them to pull them from the game altogether, with the promise that they would someday return.
Much like the Death Star 2, right?
Yeah.
However, it seems like the publisher is having second thoughts about that in the weeks since they made the announcement. Company CFO Blake Jorgensen indicated in a recent talk that microtransactions could be gone for good from Battlefront 2.
Jorgensen spoke at the 37th NASDAQ Investors Conference this week, calling the entire ordeal a learning experience. He added, clearly we are very focused on listening to the consumer and understanding what the consumer wants, and that's evolving constantly. But we're working on improving the progression system. We've turned the MTX off as an opportunity to work on the progression system inside the game.
He went on to say, over time we'll address how we will want to bring the MTX either into the game or not, and what form we will decide to bring it into.
So it sounds like there's a chance EA won't even mess with bringing microtransactions back into Battlefront 2. Of course, given what we've seen already from the company with the recent beta of UFC 3, for example, they're probably itching to get them back in there.
Some might say this is a good example of the industry learning to regulate itself, which for many is a better goal than getting the government involved. However, Representative Lee says that might not be the ultimate answer for the problem this big. In the form letter Lee supplied for gamers to use with their officials, he writes that current regulatory body, the ESA, will continue to rule in favor of whatever is the most lucrative for publishers.
So we'll have to see how this whole thing shakes out and whether or not the rest of the industry takes these current anti-loot box bills seriously.
What do you guys think of the anti-loot box laws that lawmakers are starting to draft? Let us know in the comments.
For future updates on loot boxes and all their controversies, remember to like this video, and if you're new around here, subscribe to the now.
I think I'm a little narcoleptic.
Really?
Yeah, I feel like if I close my eyes, like when they're cutting my hair, I almost fall asleep.
I mean,
like every time I have to fight.
Fallen asleep at my desk before. Is that narcolepsy or is that just exhaustion?
Both. I can fall asleep any moment. Right now, you told me to fall asleep. I fall asleep within like 5 minutes.
That is a little bit narcoleptic.
Yeah.
Oh, but then your Twitter bio, Gus.